I'd like to bring us all together. I am so grateful that you're here so early on an early cold January morning to talk about important matters, and that's what we do in adult education. And here we are today talking about the Dreamers program here in Santa Fe and what it might mean for the rest of the world. It's a huge issue that we sometimes don't remember and think about, but we have two people here, Ruby and Michelle, who are going to enlighten us on what's going on right now and tell us more about this. I'm looking forward to it. So without any further delay, Ruby actually is a child of the church. I've known Ruby since she was that tall. And it's nice to see Ruby this tall and back around with us right now. So Ruby, Michelle, it's all yours. So glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Ruby, I think you need to click got it on the screen. It's showing. I don't know if you're getting that same thought.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Ruby, and I work as a legal assistant at Santa Fe Dreamers Project. And I originally became interested in immigration law working at Gerard's House here in Santa Fe with their Young Latino Parents program for people who are suffering from some immigration-related loss. So that got me interested in the legal side of immigration, and taking a year off from school right now, but I'll go back in the fall to study public policy, potentially on the law track. And my colleague, Michelle, so you can get.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Michelle Perez. I am relatively new to the city of New Mexico. I moved here in June 2020. I started my graduate program shortly after that. I'm completing a master's in community and regional planning at UNM. And recently I joined the Santa Fe Dreamers team as a public ally. Similar to Ruby and the legal assistant role, and the reason why I was interested in joining this nonprofit specifically is because every community that I've lived in, I've had the privilege of living in a diverse community where my neighbors and my friends and loved ones aren't documented, and their life is shaped very differently because of it. And I acknowledge like my privilege being born here in Southern California. And being city planner, I understand that law, policies, they all shape our lives when it comes to zoning, to city ordinances. Thank you again so much for inviting me today. And we'll be going over the Deferred Action this morning and other services that we offer at the Santa Fe Dreamers Project.
Okay. So hold up here. So the Santa Fe Dreamers Project was founded in 2014 by Allegra Love, and it was originally established to provide DACA services, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And since then, we've expanded to include a wide variety of services, including family-based residency, citizenship, work permits, humanitarian visa programs, and LGBTQ+ asylum services, which I'll go into those a little bit more later. And then we also have community education programs kind of like this, just trying to keep our community informed about the immigration law and policies, especially since they're changing constantly. So we have workshops that we'll do, presentations, and then collaboration with schools or other local organizations for to educate them, and then also to receive referrals for clients who may need our services, and then also to refer people out for the services we can't provide. So Gerard's House, the New Mexico Center on Law and Poverty, New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs. So just a variety. We even have some organizations in Taos and Valencia County to provide services for more remote areas of this state. And then we also have, we do a lot of advocacy work. So if that's legislative advocacy or participating in coalitions, and then working with other immigration law services and nonprofits to advocate for better immigration policies. And then actually we had produced 2 documentaries that resulted in, let me just make sure I get the facts right about this. 2 documentaries which resulted in major victories, including the closure of the trans pod at Cibolo County Detention Center, and the divestment of the New Mexico Educational Retirement Board from private prison companies involved in immigration detention. So both of these documentaries, if you're interested, this first one is about trans asylum seekers and the horrible things they go through in detention. And then this one is about refugee and asylum seekers in the US. This one is a little bit longer. The first one is just 5 minutes. All right, and then I'm gonna start it to Michelle.
Thank you. Yes, so it's very important to share that there are distinctions between folks who are DACA recipients versus folks who are dreamers. So the term dreamers originated from the DREAM Act that was first introduced in 2001, which aimed to provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrant youth. While DACA recipients are a subset of dreamers, not all dreamers are DACA recipients. And please let me know if I need to repeat anything or slow down. And also, DACA recipients are individuals who came to the United States as minors, met certain criteria, and were granted temporary protection from deportation and also a work permit. Yeah, we should go to the next slide. Thank you, Ruby. And when we're talking about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, it is important to note that this was established in 2012 by former President Barack Obama. And essentially, it aims to provide temporary relief for deportation for certain undocumented individuals who were brought to the United States as minors. So when we hear this term Deferred Action, it means that the status to eligible individuals to consider them a lower priority for deportation. The status allows them to stay in the United States without immediate fear of removal. There are various forms of deferred action. Some are associated with humanitarian protection, such as the U visa and VAWA, which is Violence Against Women Act, which is designed to protect certain victims of crime and abuse. Also, DACA is an interim benefit. So it only offers temporary relief from deportation and providing work authorization to eligible recipients. And folks need to renew their DACA every 2 years, and there is a filing fee associated to that. It is important to note that, again, this is not a direct pathway to citizenship or to legal residency. And currently, there is approximately 580,000 folks in the United States that currently have DACA. And there is 800,000 folks who have benefited from it since its initial inception.
So the difference in numbers there, if your DACA has been expired for over 6 months, you lose it at this point in time. It hasn't always been like that. So some people have lost because of that. You can also lose your DACA status permanently if you have any criminal history. So that's a significant misdemeanor, which is up to USCIS to decide. So things like DUIs, you are almost automatically ineligible for DACA. So a lot of people have lost it. And if it's over 6 months expired, you have to submit an initial application again, which at this time they're not approving. So that's the difference in numbers there.
Thank you, Ruby. Yeah, so understanding the scope of DACA, it's important to talk about the limitations. And they're important because they're crucial in discussions about immigration policy and the rights of undocumented individuals here in the United States. So DACA recipients are ineligible for federal benefits, such as the Social Security, like safety net programs, also federal financial aid for college, and sometimes even receiving like food stamps. Um, Despite this, DACA recipients are required to pay the federal income taxes. DACA recipients are given a social security number or have an ITIN number already, so we do file federal and state taxes. And there is a lot of restrictions on travel. So generally, DACA recipients cannot travel outside of the United States unless they have obtained permission to do so through advance parole. And there is a filing fee for that permission, and it has to have a specific reason, such as education, employment, or another humanitarian purpose. Also, again, the lack of the long-term guarantee. So again, DACA does not offer permanent solution or a clear path to citizenship. Let's see, and depending on um, the governmental party, like policies are very big, are big differently. Um, and also the next one, the ineligibility to vote. So that recipients are not eligible to vote in federal elections because they're not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. And also, depending on the state that DACA recipients live in, the benefits vary like significantly when it comes to their access to education, healthcare, things like that. And we've touched on this right now, the risk of losing that status. So there's various reasons why it could be revoked or denied. And it is at the discretion of USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. And yeah, understanding these limitations helps highlight the challenges and uncertainties that DACA recipients face.
Yeah. So the reason why we talk about this, kind of like Michelle said, we want to emphasize that DACA is a great program, but also not enough. It has a lot of limitations, and the DREAM Act that was originally introduced in 2001 and has been introduced 11 times since at least, would provide the children who came to the U.S. or immigrants who came to the U.S. as children with some path to residency, but DACA does not. And that is a big deal because we'll talk eventually about what pathways to citizenship are. But it's really hard to get residency, and it costs a lot of money, and you have to meet a lot of criteria. So the fact that DACA recipients, the reason they are getting this benefit is so that they can work and go to school, and in addition to having protection from deportation. These 580,000 people are working and in school and paying taxes and do not receive the benefits that most other people who pay taxes and work in the US do. So that's just important to know, especially when we talk about the rhetoric around undocumented people in the US. So yeah, these people are working and they live here and they've been here since they were children. A lot of them have not seen their family in whatever country they're coming from since they came here as children. So that's another important thing to note. Okay. And so then moving on to the timeline, I'm not going to go through all of this because I don't even really understand a lot of what it means, to be honest. But the key points here are that in 2021, Judge Hainan, who is a Texas judge, ruled that DACA was unlawful. And so this changed the course of DACA because people are no longer allowed to, they are allowed to, but the initial DACA applications are not approved at this point. So since 2021, people who have not originally applied for DACA can no longer do so. And people who have DACA are able to renew. But again, the people who have the 6-month expired DACA cards are not able to receive DACA again because that would require an initial application. And then again, in September 2023, Judge Heenan ruled that DACA was unlawful. And this was actually the third time it was declared unlawful. So ever since its establishment in 2012, DACA has been in a lot of legal limbo, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. But what it means that it was declared unlawful in September. Now it will go to the Fifth Court Circuit of Appeals, and if they rule against DACA, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And based on the current Supreme Court makeup, it's likely that DACA will be ruled against. And so what that means is that 1,000 DACA recipients will lose their jobs every week for the next 2 years. And then also all of those people will remove their protection from deportation. So those are 600,000 people that are no longer have that protection, no longer have job security. And yeah, so that's a big impact. And so we're not sure that will happen or not, but we'll know by the end of this year or 2025. So yeah, it's a big deal for sure. And so then I also wanted to talk about the pathways to citizenship and legal residency that are available. So when we talk about legal permanent residency versus citizenship, legal permanent residency is a green card. So you receive a green card when you're a legal permanent resident and you have legal status. So with DACA, you do not have legal status. Technically, you have no status, though you have a work permit. With legal permanent residency, you do not need a work permit. Your green card gives you the ability to work and travel outside of the US. It does not give you the ability to vote. And you have to renew it every 10 years. So it is also something that you have to continue throughout your life. And then it can be taken away depending on certain circumstances. So based on crime, it's not as easy to be taken away as like with a DACA card, but it can be taken away. Whereas citizenship, you become a citizen once and that's it, you're able to vote and it's not taken away. So how can you get there? So one of the ways is through marriage or through your US citizen child who is 21 or older. And then also through an employer, but it's pretty rare to get an employer-sponsored green card unless you have some kind of very special skill and you're in a job that is making a lot of money that is unique to something that few people can do. So it's pretty rare. And so the family-based petitions, a U.S. citizen spouse can sponsor your residency, and then a child who is over 21 who is a U.S. citizen. And there are also limits on this based on criminal history, how you came to the U.S., if it was if you had a visa that you overstayed versus coming in without inspection. So there are limitations on all of these things, but that's a pretty common route for people to take. So family-based petition, you get your residency, and then 5 years later, or 3 years, depending, you can then get your citizenship. And then a path that is limited to children, technically under 21, but there is a little bit of a gray area in the 18 to 21 age range. So it's called Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, SIJS. And so this is for children who have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by one or both parents, and they're in the custody of someone here in the US. And so this does provide a route to residency and then eventually citizenship for children. But the thing with this application is that the child cannot then petition for their parents later on. So that automatically excludes the family-based petition option at the top of the list for the parents. So it's likely that the child could have residency and eventually citizenship, but the parent may not, depending on their other options. And then there's the Violence Against Women Act. We call it VAWA. It's for men as well. And this one is specifically for victims of crime, sexual assault, violent crime, domestic violence by a U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse, parent, or child. And then we have the U and T visas. So the U visa is also a humanitarian program based on victims of violent crime, domestic violence, etc. But it does not matter if it's a U.S. citizen or not. However, the wait times are around 10 to 20 years, even in some cases. And the reason why is because there is a 10,000 visa distribution cap each year. So there are a lot more than 10,000 people who apply for this. And the reason why is because with the U visa and the T visa as well, it has exemptions for a lot of things that people who cannot qualify for family-based petition would receive. So like if you came into the country illegally without being inspected, then there is a waiver for that. And with the U visa, there are certain waivers for crimes, especially because victims of crime sometimes do have criminal history based on abusive partnerships or whatever. So there are more exemptions for those things. So for people who do not qualify for a family-based petition, or some of the other things on here, can put in a petition for the U visa, even though it might be 10 to 20 years before they receive that actual approval. And then the T visa is for victims of trafficking. And so there is less of a wait time and less of a backlog, but it's because it's much harder to prove those applications. So the U visa, something I forgot to mention about the U visa, you have to collaborate with police. And the reason why this was even created was to encourage people to go to the police with the crime that happened to them, because a lot of people were scared about their status and did not want to report to the police when they were victims of crime or witnessed crimes. And so this was to encourage that. And so with the T visa, it's much harder to get proof that you were a trafficking victim than a victim of crime, unfortunately. So they do get approved, and there are people who can get residency that way, but it is a little bit harder. And then there's asylum, which we personally at the Santa Fe German Project do not do, because they require a lot of time and resources. And in El Paso, which is where the judge hears the asylum cases for New Mexico, right now they're only approving 2%, actually a little bit less than 2% of asylum cases. So the chances of winning your asylum case are very slim. In other states, it can be different. But yeah, unfortunately, it's very rare to win your asylum case, even if you have faced horrible things. And actually, LGBTQ victims of crimes are more likely to get asylum. So we do have a program for that community that we work with. And then there are some other ways to get residency on a case-by-case basis. But these are the main ones. And then I'm not going to try to go through this chart with you, but this doesn't even include humanitarian programs. So it does not include SIJS, VAWA, or UNT visas, or even asylum. So basically only includes the top option. And those are the steps you have to go through and nuances to these things. So you can see the green squares are if you can get a green card with your situation, and the red is if there's no option based on that. So it's a really hard process. There are a lot of nuances and that is why we like to share about this, because it is really hard to get residency and citizenship as an undocumented person here in the US. And something that has a big impact is the way you vote. So that's something we like to share, is that voting has a big impact. So please vote. And just if you see stuff in the news about what people are doing with the asylum programs and with border patrol and enforcement, hopefully now you have kind of an idea, some kind of basis to go off of when you hear about those things. And we also have resources in the back. If you want to sign up for our newsletter, we have on the little cards with our social media, we have a newsletter that has up-to-date immigration news. So I want to move over to see if anyone has questions. It's a lot of information, and this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Is Allegra Love from here?
I don't think she was born here. She went to Dartmouth, and then she went to the UNM School of Law. I don't know if she's originally from New Mexico or not. She no longer works with the Dream Work Project, so she left in 2021. But
How many clients do you have right now?
so we actually have 1,180 open cases right now, I believe. The exact numbers on our website, but we have a lot of clients. And some of these are something like the U visa, which is a long wait period. So we have clients from way back. We are bringing in new clients all the time. So right now we have over 1,000 open cases.
Yeah, and every Monday in Albuquerque, I'm at the DACA clinic, so we're renewing DACA in Albuquerque every Monday from 2 to 5 at the New Mexico Dream Team. And meeting is actually here in San Jose.
On Thursdays, So we do a lot of DACA renewal applications, so that also accounts for a large number of those cases as well.
How many undocumented residents do you think there are in the
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. That's probably you could Google. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know actually the answer to that.
Yes.
But that's I don't want to be. I don't want to say.
But that's a great question, and definitely like an important statistic to add to our presentation in the future. Sorry. Yeah.
See.
I don't have the website. So let it know.
We'll get back to you about that.
Do we have border patrol on our southern border?
Yes. So on all of the borders, there are border patrol, and it does depend on the state, how much funding goes to border patrol, and also how intense the border patrol officers are. But even in New Mexico, which is a blue state, we have a lot of problems with the border patrol and the detention centers. The one we were talking earlier about, the TransPod at Cibola Detention Center, they just have that, especially that's detention center, have horrible practices towards the people who come in and are assigned to that detention center. And especially with COVID just being so packed full, and people getting sick, and not having the resources or the medications that they need, being separated from their families. The detention center and border patrol piece isn't even something we went into this presentation, but there are just horrific conditions, even in a place like New Mexico.
How many detention centers are there in New Mexico?
That's a good question. There's Cibola.
Cibola.
So there's that one, and then there's another one.
I think it's about a handful of them.
Like maybe 5.
Yeah.
yeah, so
I just also want to follow up. So as of 2019, in the state of New Mexico, there was 63,000 folks who are undocumented living in the state of New Mexico, according to the Migration Policy Institute. And also according to the American Immigration Council, in the year 2020, nearly 1 in 10 New Mexico residents is an immigrant, while 1 in 9 residents is a native born U.S. citizen with at least one immigrant parent.
mhm. And undocumented people also do work for the most part. A lot of undocumented people do work even without the work permit. There are ways around it. And that is also something that is excused even on the family-based petition. So if you work without a work permit, that's something that is reasonable, that USCIS is like, most people need to work to support themselves and their family. So yeah, even if you're undocumented, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not working.
I was able to find more information about the ICE detention facilities. So the three predominant ones in New Mexico, Cebolla, Otero, and Fort County.
The three big ones.
And there are, for the most part, these ICE detention facilities are privately managed. So it's difficult when we are requesting documents or information about the conditions there, because since they're not a public entity, there has to be more advocacy done to get the private managed, operators to let us know and let us in on the conditions there.
Did you say they're federally owned?
Private.
Private, that's,
Mhm.
yeah.
Private, yeah.
Yeah.
Dignity not distinction.
Yeah. So there's actually something coming up, speaking of advocacy, that is called the Dignity Not Detention Act. So this is an act, I don't know exactly what the parameters are, but part of it is moving away from New Mexico as a state, moving away from these privately owned detention centers, because they're really problematic and have really horrific conditions, especially for LGBTQ community members. So yeah, and that is on January 18th. We are partaking in a roundhouse event for this Dignity Not Detention Act. So if you're interested in more information about that, it's also part of our newsletter. But yeah, definitely the detention centers. We could have a whole other discussion about that. But yeah, just really terrible conditions. And
Yeah. I'm seeing on their Instagram, the Dignity Not Detention here in New Mexico. There's a day of action on January 18th right here at the Santa Fe Capitol, from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then a rally from 1 to 2 p.m.
I apologize, I'm hard of hearing in between the last, I didn't get all of what you said, but are there one or two specific groups that push back against DACA? And if so, who are
Yeah, so on that timeline, we see the specific word,
Texas judge.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the DACA program, I don't even really know exactly why and which people are pushing back against it, but definitely in this case, Judge Hanen, who is a Texas judge, has pushed back against DACA at least twice, if not 3 times. So I think Texas is a state that pushes against DACA a lot.
are they doing it because of they feel the judge, for example, in Texas, the Southern Court there in Texas, is he doing it because he's saying you're in violation of immigration law, or what?
So it's not, I don't know how much Judge Hanen knows about immigration law, but I think it's more about unconstitutional use of power. It's honestly, I did read about this and I didn't exactly understand where he was coming from. But I think it's actually, I don't even really know.
Let me just mention one group that I have talked to
Okay.
that pushes back against it. I don't agree with them,
Mhm,
but it's kind of like, we're here and we don't want you here.
mhm,
There's a lot of people that I talk to are people that came over years ago,
mhm,
in some cases even undocumented, and somehow got their legal status and became citizens. And they're, for some reason, they're opposed to this program.
mhm,
And it's something I don't understand. Of course, a lot of people I've talked to came over under the Reagan
mhm,
amnesty program.
mhm,
So, we got in, now we want to close the door.
mhm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think it also just kind of shows you the rhetoric around immigration and immigration policies and DACA. A lot of people just really are not very informed about what the program actually is. Because DACA does not provide any legal residency. All it is a work permit and protection from deportation. So I think a lot of people, for one, I think that people come to the United States and, use whatever Social Security benefits or, take jobs. I've heard that before as well. And, don't belong here. So I think a lot of people don't understand DACA. These people came to the US for the most part. They had to come as children before 2017, I think, or maybe it was even before 2012. They had to come over. So it's not, yeah, I don't even really know how to describe this. But I think it's just a lot of misinformation that has been spread about undocumented people and DACA and residency and citizenship.
Yeah, and I think also like in these nuanced conversations about like folks making opinions about immigration policy, I honestly always want to give props to like the New Mexico Dream Team and other local advocacy groups of young people who are actually living undocumented, who actually have the lived experience, detention on dignity. They do a great job at reaching out to folks that actually have been in detention and have that lived experience and are actually seeking like refuge because of things happening in their home country. So I feel I always want people with a lived experience to talk about how does this immigration policy shape your life. I've met a lot of folks that it's a even just as a third party viewing it, you're coming in for a brief consultation and maybe one of your first time meeting somebody who knows about immigration law. And in those few seconds, you're learning about your autonomy, your body now in the United States and everything that you've had to do to get here. And then how the policy is already shaped and it's rigid. So yeah, I think it's good to have folks that have that lived experience and immigration attorneys who have been doing the work and advocacy since before early 2001. Because then we get into the multi-generational conversation. But yeah, thank you. Great question.
Yeah, sorry, that didn't really answer it very well, but yeah, I think it is brings up a good point to just keep up with the organizations and the voices that are experiencing this firsthand and have that perspective. And at a place like New Mexico Dream Team, they are sharing information that is up to date and relevant. And yeah, it brings up some of these points about people who may be pushing against the program and trying to keep those people and those communities where those people may be, like in Texas, for example, that advocacy work up to date and relevant.
Yeah, two questions, Ruby, and Michelle.
First of all, I'm wondering where you get your funding.
Mhm.
And then secondly, you said be sure to vote.
Mhm.
However, it's looking like it doesn't matter if who's the president or whatever, because we've got one single judge in Texas
Mhm.
making these big decisions for all these young adults. So those are my,
Mhm. Yeah.
like, what can we do if it's not about voting? What else can we do?
Mhm. Yeah, so the voting, I think also, because Judge Heenan does, is able to say that it's unlawful, but at the end of the day, he's not gonna be able to have the final say about it. And the Supreme Court will. And so if we look at, the Trump administration and having the Supreme Court judges from that administration still on the Supreme Court, and
It'll be there
those,
for very long.
yeah, and those people will be making the final call. So I think it's not necessarily like, okay, this election is going to have a say on whether or not DACA remains, but yeah, just in general, and you're right, it is hard to say.
But why would one person have so much power? That's my question.
I mean, we saw the same thing with student loans, right? So Biden promised to tackle student debt and it was going well. And another judge in Texas ruled against it. So I think that it's like a larger conversation about like checks and balances. And I'm not like super well versed on like civics. But yeah, it's something that we can challenge and have discourse about. And it's a great question. And how can we talk about immigration policy bipartisan or across the aisle on like just figuring it out. And there are definitely if you want to join that day of action at the roundhouse here in Santa Fe, I think that'd be a great opportunity to hear from your local elected officials, right? Because we elect folks, so listening during the campaigning, like, are you talking about DACA? Are you talking about immigration policies? Or what are you only focusing on? What do you not want to talk about? Especially like during election season and stuff. I did want to share with you some of our funders. So on our website, we do talk about folks that we do receive funding from. So we have the American Immigration Council. We have the City of Albuquerque's Office on Equity and Inclusion, the City of Santa Fe, Community Health Funders Alliance. It's quite a long list, but
Yeah, we don't receive, we go off of grants and donations and funding from these organizations. We don't receive funding from the state. So we have these grants and what does it say here? 1,100 individual donors. So yeah, we that's another thing I was gonna say and how we can support is contributing time or money if you have it to organizations, not just ours, but the ones who are doing this advocacy work that is so important to stay informed, and also these providing free or low cost legal services to make sure that people have access to it. Especially at this time, speaking of voting, we are really trying to get people their citizenship because there are a lot of people who have green cards and are eligible for citizenship. So that's an initiative we also do so that we can have more people eligible to vote who are members of these communities. But yeah, so making donations to organizations that support these services, or volunteering. We have DACA clinics that we always have volunteers so we can, get as many people and as many applications in as we can. So, yeah.
It might be clarifying who pays you guys, like that would be helpful too, about the funding. You're not paid by the Dreamers Fund.
Yeah, well, we are partially paid. Our program is run through UNF. So that's another thing. We also collaborate with the AmeriCorps program, Public Allies. And so they fund a portion of our salary as well as like a service corps.
Yeah, we're AmeriCorps members, like we are, volunteers, are part of this program. And the AmeriCorps even program itself has like a long history of, putting folks in community spaces to be capacity builders. So we have our capacity builders and really support the Santa Fe Dreamers Project. These are attorneys, accredited legal reps who work like tirelessly to help the undocumented community, and however we can do more outreach and support them. We're doing that.
I'm wondering about the work permits.
Mhm.
Do some of these people feel it's a negative to get a work permit because then all their information is in a public database? And so how do you view the work? Is it good to get a work permit? Is it a good step on the way to getting citizenship? So that was one question. And the other, so are the work permits granted by federal agents here in the state of New Mexico?
So, the first question, I think part of the reason why, especially with a program like DACA, there is definitely a lot of concern about people's information. You share your name and your address and your social security number that you received with DACA. So that is definitely a concern for folks, especially with, I think we had a slide on here that had this image here. People, if with the uncertainty around DACA and the potential of it being ruled against, people definitely do worry about their information. Something I do want to share, when we hear from politicians or whomever speaking about deporting people, and it's like, oh, we're going to have a mass deportation and everybody who is here illegally is going to be gone in the next week. That is not the case. Even right now, removal people are placed in removal proceedings, and it takes years for them to actually leave the country, depending on the situation. In some like prisons and places where there are certain categories of who's higher priority for deportation. But for people who have received DACA and do not have criminal history because they can't with DACA, these people will probably stay because it's a long process that you have to go through trial to be in removal proceedings. So yeah, but again, a lot of people don't know that, and it is scary to think that you're going to be forced back to your home country in a matter of days. And so even if it is a matter of years, it's scary to think that. So that definitely I think is a concern. But I think having a work permit does open up a lot of doors for people, because to work with a work permit, you can have a higher paying job. If you don't have a work permit, a lot of times people are paid in cash or there's some sort of arrangement. So typically people who have a work permit can secure better jobs because they are allowed to hold that job. And so the employer's not gonna be in trouble for that.
And so DACA is authorized through USCIS, so it's the federal government. And so it's the United States. I had it up right now. If you would like the full name,
U.S. Center for Immigration Services.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a federal.
Mhm.
It's a federal government program. So it's not through the state.
Yeah, all the renewals, we send it to them, it's their form. We have to actually keep a close eye on their website to make sure that we know everything about how we're supposed to file it, where to file, and the fees for filing.
What
So-
are the fees, Michelle? What are the fees for filing every couple of years?
So there's two fees. One is $85 made to the United States Homeland Security, and then the other fee is $410. So we always ask folks to bring their two money orders, one renewing their DACA every 2 years.
Yeah. So the total, yeah, is $495. And that's for the two applications, the two forms that you send to USCIS. In terms of, what the state can do, so the benefits vary by state. So for example, people can get driver's license with their DACA card in New Mexico. In a place like Texas, they might not be able to do that. So that's where it comes to the state to determine what people can do with their DACA card. And in New Mexico, we have a pretty expansive range of what people can do, you know, with their DACA card.
What are those two fees for? I mean, just.
It's for the forms. It's just, you know,
Yeah.
it's for the forms to be processed and to get the card. So the 410 is for the actual DACA application, and then the other one is for the work permit, or maybe it's the other way around.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the 410 is
It's
for
for
the
the, yeah.
work authorization and the card, and then the 410 or the 85 is for the actual like DACA approval.
So do the federal agents, when they get these applications, do they investigate the person in their country of origin?
No, especially because folks like during the renewal process, like the first, well, I have not seen an initial application, personally, but, you know, these folks have already submitted their biometrics to the federal government with height, weight, color of hair, fingerprints. So sometimes during a renewal, they'll ask folks to redo them, but it's really chosen at random. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's just they, you know, briefly check what they've done, like in the US, but in terms of their country of origin, especially because a lot of people came over when they were very young, like babies, there's usually not a lot to investigate in the country of origin.
And speaking of country of origin, like the clients you have now, what countries are they coming from?
I mean, I don't know the exact
Or I should say,
statistics and
because they've been here long.
Yeah.
I think definitely the country where we have the most people from is from Mexico. But again, also it does take into account that we don't do asylum services. So I think that would also change things. I don't know if any of you were in Andrew Black's presentation about talking about Venezuelan asylum seekers. So I would imagine if we had those asylum services available, that there might be people from other countries. But yeah, I would say Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras are the main ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I see folks from like everywhere. Like, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if we have actually that published anywhere, how many people we have from each country.
I'm interested in the advocacy work. Or is anything being done? Who's the main people making sure people know these are the issues, can support this, support dreamers? I mean, how does that all work? I mean, I don't hear much about that.
In terms of like which organization?
Yeah, organizations, and do they get to senators and representatives, and I mean, is there that work being done?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think New Mexico Dream Team is one that really specializes in that kind of advocacy. My understanding is that they don't have any legal services. It's all about advocacy. And so they're kind of the people that I would say do that kind of, you know, writing the letters to people, making calls, going to these rallies, and the Dignity Non-Detention Act that is an entire organization, Dignity Not Detention. So there are definitely people who specialize in that advocacy work and pieces of it. So I know New Mexico Dream Team does a lot of DACA advocacy, and Dignity Not Detention is a lot more detention work. And then our LGBTQ programs team, they do a lot of advocacy specifically for that community, asylum seekers, the LGBTQ community, and communicating with organizations in El Paso at that border to coordinate how they can get resources for people there. And yeah, so I think a lot of nonprofits like ours do advocacy work in addition to the legal services we provide, which for a lot of the people on our team, that takes up a lot of the time. But yeah, there are organizations specifically for advocacy work, and a lot of them are in Albuquerque.
Yeah, and they're two very different hats. Like, the attorneys that are at our nonprofit that like have to know like wraparound legal services, and then wearing that different hat of advocacy. Like they're also, two very different roles. And one other group I could think of is the UNS School of Law. They're awesome. There's awesome professors there that are trying to create a pipeline of like law students who want to be immigration lawyers. And they have a great fellowship, the Border Justice Initiative, where they give fellowships for an attorney, a law student who wants to be an immigration law attorney, and supports them and finances it and funds it. Yeah, we actually have one of those fellows at our nonprofit right now, and he's awesome. So yeah, just even taking a look at what the Border Justice Initiative is doing at UNM School of Law.
Does anybody else have questions? Anybody else? Do we have a port of entry in New Mexico? And I know the Biden administration is trying to get people to come through a port of entry. So how do you see that? Why are people, what's the advantage of crossing illegally versus through a port of entry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we do have a port of entry, if not two. We have Las Palomas in New Mexico is a port of entry that people come through, and it's way south. And I don't know, that's yeah, and Columbus. So we have those, and the benefit of going through a port of entry is that you're inspected and paroled through. So people who have visas, like tourist visas, come through port of entry. And the advantage to that is that once you do some of these applications to get your residency, like through marriage or through your child, proving that you came in with a visa, even if you overstayed it, is an advantage. And you have to get a waiver if you came in without a visa. And so that is the advantage there. However, it can be hard to get these visas. They cost more money. So people who cross without a visa and are not inspected, I think usually it's a cost, and it's more, on your own time, because getting a visa is a much longer process. So people who need to leave urgently and, don't have the resources to get a visa will cross without being inspected. But it is actually more likely that people come in with a visa than, a lot of people make it seem like everyone who's undocumented came in without being inspected, which there are more people who came in legally. So.
For the nationalists, you have the bottom line that says these DACA people are taking our jobs.
Mm-hmm.
give me one thing that I can respond to a nationalist and says, this is the one reason we should support. And I don't mean the whole program, but an individual DACA person. Why should we support that one person in balance with the possibility that that person might be taking a job? One thing, not 10.
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of fact that, the circumstance of survival and these folks, DACA recipients, came as children, and they are applying to work legally in the United States. And they pay taxes, and, I'm not gonna, I don't know if that was 3 or 1, but, you know, these are folks who came as children and are taking the steps that the US government is saying. And those are still very rigid requirements and eligibility. I believe, I think the year is 2007, June, yeah, something in June of 2007. Like they have to meet a lot of eligibility requirements, and you know, these folks were children, and they're doing the pathway that the United States government is saying. And DACA recipients, again, are only a subset of dreamers, are only a portion of folks who came as children, because other folks didn't meet the DACA recipient eligibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the supporting the economy is a big thing that a lot of people care about. So I feel like that would probably be my answer. They pay taxes and, you know,
Because what, I'm sorry.
they pay taxes and support the economy, just as much as US citizens. So that would be my answer, I think.
And I'm sort of a history buff, so like we have seen in the past, the United States having these very interesting immigration policies and like work permit programs, like the Bracero program. So we're gonna allow men who live in Mexico to come work in the field, and like again, still had very certain eligibility and requirements. And you know, folks in Mexico saw, okay, I could go in with my buddy, but they get accepted into the Bracero program and I don't. But the infrastructure is there. The train is still going, the money is still flowing. So I think that there's a history of US like immigration policy when it comes to work authorization that is like very worthy of like reading ourselves and like digesting ourselves and saying like, whoa, like all these limitations sort of are really impactful. And yeah, even just, you know, talking about like borders and like the creation of them and just how history has got us here. So let's like learn it to try to undo like the really harmful things. So yeah, I think the historian part of my brain is like, let's read about that. Let's not forget. Because yeah, it's currently shaping our immigration policy.
Can I add something to that? I would say have them actually talk to a DACA recipient. And I think in our experience, we became very close to a family that during the Hungarian Revolution, his grandmother swam across the Danube to escape, leaving his father as an infant alone, with the idea that they would eventually find each other, and they didn't until 40 years later. And so when they found out that his grandmother, his father's mother, was in New Jersey, they all left Hungary and they went to visit her, and then they stayed and they went to the government and they said, here we are. And Kopan was only 5 years old. And his brother ended up being valedictorian of his class. The military wanted to pay for him to become a medic, a doctor through the military, but they couldn't because he was DACA recipient. And with no financial aid.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, just these kids were 5 and 2 when they arrived in Hungary. And if you do them now, and now Copeland is married and working for the Senate. So these are kids, they just grow up as kids, as American kids. I don't really think they think of themselves different, too much different. But then there's always that thing in the back. But they're definitely American. It's heartbreaking to think that they would ever send those kids back to Hungary. It's ridiculous.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, it's about 10, a lot of great information. Thank you all for being here. And I appreciate your time and all the information you've given us. And then I'll just go quickly, and that's Charlie. Quickly to next week, just since you're all sitting here, next week we have 2 weeks worth of looking at the book that's being sold out in the lobby for $20 called The Gospel of Peace by John Deere, Father John Deere, who used to live here in Santa Fe. He's coming back on February 4th to give a message and then have a program for the whole community at 1 o'clock that day. And it's a wonderful commentary to look at the scripture through the eyes of nonviolence. And so we'll look at that for 2 weeks, and then pretty soon John will be here and we'll go forward like that. But thank you again. Thank you again for all the work you're doing.